The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, Cilla Whatcott is joining us. Cilla is a board-certified classical homeopath. She has a BA from Arizona State University. She has a diploma from a 4-year professional program at Northwestern Academy of Homeopathy in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She also has a PhD in homeopathy. She is an author and a filmmaker and an international speaker. Cilla's 3-part film series can be found at realimmunity.org. Quest for Immunity, Choosing Immunity, and The Passage to Real Immunity. She has also been featured on Truth About Vaccines, and her work has been published in a number of publications. She is passionate about spreading awareness about homeoprophylaxis. So this is very important in this time of great need for answers in our health. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Naturally Inspired Podcast with Cilla Whatcott. Thank you so much for being on the Naturally Inspired Podcast today, Cilla.
Thank you, Tammy. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. I came across some of your videos and I've been listening to them, and I watched your documentary, which I loved. What a fabulous introduction for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really did a great job on that. It was really nicely done.
Thank you.
So let's get our audience acquainted with you. How did you get into homeopathy?
Oh, my children brought me here. I was pretty conventional, actually considered going into medicine, enjoyed it, and I adopted these children from all over the world, China, Russia, Taiwan. They all had problems, and no one could help them. So one pediatrician said, you should try homeopathy for asthma. I took my son to a homeopath, and in 6 months it was gone. And then my daughter, who had kidney reflux, gone. My son with migraines, gone. And I saw how curative homeopathy was. So I went back to school in my late 40s, 4 years of homeopathic school, and then a PhD, lots of additional training afterwards, because homeopaths are always learning. They never stop learning. And I love it. I'm home. This is where I need to be. This is what I'm here for. And yeah,
That's wonderful.
Explored all different aspects of homeopathy, healing the immune system.
Yeah, that's one thing I've really noticed through interviewing professionals in healthcare is anyone that practices functional medicine, chiropractic care, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine, they're constantly upgrading their education. It is an ongoing process, and they're really involved in that. And, you know, I've interviewed some medical doctors and some allopathic practitioners, and it feels like to me that their continued education is different. It's not, it's more, pharmaceutical based maybe, or it's, conventions that tend to be selling or introducing new products and new, So it's really interesting.
Pharma provides a medical education. So in med school, they're learning, pharma intervention. So of course, pharma's providing all their continuing ed.
Right. And that makes sense. Whereas in natural medicine, it's really about getting in and collaborating with people who've had success with different protocols, emerging science that, may not be getting a lot of light in allopathic care, which is very common. So it's always exciting to talk to people like yourselves because I feel like you guys are on the cutting edge of the new stuff that's coming out.
Well, intense curiosity. I think that's an
Yeah.
earmark of people in my field and other natural fields. They're curious. They
Yeah.
want to know. So they're not just taking things at face value and saying, "I learned it all. I'm done. That's it."
Right. Right. And when we don't have solutions to problems, um, you should be curious, right? You should continue. I always kind of say this is this idiopathic. That's not a diagnosis,
Right,
right?
right.
Idiopathic. We don't know why. Okay, we don't know why right now, but maybe we should continue to look, right?
Right, absolutely.
So the film that I was talking about is called. You made that in 2018.
Mhm.
What are your feelings on that right now as we sit here in 2021? Like, I was watching it and I thought, wow, wow,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
because
that.
it is exactly what people need to hear right now.
Yeah, it's what people needed to hear then.
Right.
And I felt like I was kicking and screaming trying to get it out. And I produced it because I saw my client base becoming very fearful,
Mm,
very out of touch with their intuition, very led by the nose, by media.
yeah.
That every symptom needs a drug to stop the symptom, and they are running to the ER with their newborn because, they have an itch or they have a slight fever. And I just recognized a need to teach these parents that the immune system is amazing and we're all designed to move towards perfection in our evolution. And we're
Right.
constantly adapting and growing and changing. And that's the goal. And this whole paradigm about suppressing symptoms is contaminating us. So I wanted to do a film mostly about homeoprophylaxis, which we'll get to,
Yeah.
but I realized that I need to crack the door first. I need to lay a foundation about just the immune system and what are these people saying about the immune system. So my one film turned into three feature-length films. So first is The Quest, second is Passage, which focuses more on homeoprophylaxis, and third is Choosing, because in the middle of production, I had a cancer diagnosis. So
Oh,
I
wow.
decided to go unconventional, no chemo, no radiation. And what I learned in that process, I put into choosing real immunity because I had to make choices and recognize the role that my mind, consciousness, the role that these things play in our health. So that was the third film, Choosing.
Wow. Wow. I did not know that. What was your cancer diagnosis?
I had breast cancer, stage 2 breast cancer.
Okay.
And I went to Mexico to Hope for Cancer, and a fabulous, fabulous clinic there. The people there were wonderful. And basically, they teach about cancer being a metabolic disease. It's not a local disease. I worked with some colleagues who are practitioners,
Mhm.
created my own plan, which
Right.
was daunting. I had to stay away from allopathic influence because
Yeah.
it was
The pressure.
very pressured. And basically, in Mexico, we learned that heat, light, sound, and oxygen are the four things that can boost the immune system, along with nutrition, of course, and
Right.
uh, IVs, supplemental IVs, etc. But it was fabulous, the education and the treatment that I got there, and I'm in remission and have changed my life. It was a big blessing for me because I've changed a lot about, just how I approach things, how I think, my schedule. My schedule was completely out of control. I was working 24/7. It was really unhealthy. I didn't know how to put the brakes on.
Right.
And this forced me to put the brakes on and
Right.
then start building some boundaries around work for myself,
Mhm.
which is still a challenge for me because I love what I do,
Yeah.
but I'm able to do that better.
Wow. Let's
So,
talk about this thing that you just described. This intuitive. You made some diagnoses on yourself that maybe you didn't know before. you went to that clinic, like you were overworking. Did you know that before?
I knew it, but I didn't know how to address it.
Mm,
So many times people will say, "Oh yeah, I know, but I
right.
still smoke, or I still overeat, or I still, whatever it is that they're
Yeah.
doing that they know is dangerous for them.
Yeah.
They have
What
a but."
what was it the process that you went through to look inward to diagnose those types of things that you were doing in your life that were
It,
impacting your health? Did they sit down with you with a counselor to talk about this stuff, or was it part of the
no,
protocol?
these are things you come to on your own
Yeah.
intuitively. You have to, because every case is different.
Mhm.
So it's almost like your own spirit tells you, I can't do this. Like, I
Mhm.
couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate and put my focus on someone else because I
Right.
was so concerned with what was going on with me. And it showed me the contrast, and it all happened internally. And I could see that, wow, I have put all of my focus outside of myself,
Wow.
and was able to. And then I had to think, well, how am I going to reel this in? And
Right.
yeah, so I mean, and then came the nuts and bolts of it. I did online scheduling, online payment. That eliminated 10,000 emails.
Right.
I reduced my schedule to 2 days a week so that I only have client contact 2 days a week, and the other days fill up with the emails and the interviews and the different things that I was adding at night and the weekends. And so
Right.
yeah, I mean, I still work 7 days a week, more or less, but I try to take one day for myself where I don't have any expectations.
Mhm.
And there's just freedom to, I love to cook, I love to garden, I love to read, and
Mhm.
there's freedom to do that. And there was none before. I woke up, hit the ground running with patient care, and
Right.
didn't stop until 10 or 11 at night
Right. Well,
every
it's what
day.
a valuable thing to have gone through to be able to look inward. And like you said, that's such a personal thing, right? But we're not even prompted to do that in the allopathic world, right? There's always an outside fix in that model.
Correct.
And
That's
yeah.
dangerous. And that, hopefully, my films can help people to start looking within and
Mhm.
know that they have the answers. That's our intuition.
Yep.
A valuable thing I did was a week long meditation retreat with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Oh, I love
So
Dr. Joe Dispenza. I've I've
yeah,
I've attended his seminars as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
A
intense, and I have
week.
meditated ever since, every day. So that's a number
Wow.
one priority. The first thing I do in the morning is a meditation.
Wow. And
So
that takes a lot of discipline. Meditation in the beginning is not an easy thing, and I think people give up on it pretty quickly because it feels like a waste of time. Maybe you don't see a direct impact right away. Um,
yeah, it's because we have an expectation. Like,
right.
everything we do has to result in something. So
Yes,
it's
that's
like, "What, this isn't working. What's
what
happening?"
I gotta try something else. Yeah.
Right. And you stop, you just drop the expectation. Fine, it's not working. Don't expect anything.
Right.
And then just do it. Just take the time and just do it. And I crave it. And I don't even know, I can't tangibly tell you what it's doing for me, but I know that I like I like life better when I do it.
Yeah.
So it
That's
just puts
amazing.
space in between my thoughts.
Right. Right. And we don't put enough value on that in our culture today. Grounding does that for me too. Just walking in bare feet seems like such an odd thing. But as a kid, I grew up doing that, playing on the
Right.
baseball field, bare feet, kick your shoes off, whatever, right? You didn't think
Right.
anything. But when was the last time I did that until I became purposeful with doing it,
Right.
right? When you're a
Right.
kid, it just kind of naturally happens because you're a kid and you just do what you want to do. And it's probably intuitive, but you don't
Right.
think about it. But once you
Right.
become an adult, I guess we're more programmed. So then we have to become really purposeful with it.
And those things are small. So
Mhm.
we have a tendency to say, "Oh, what difference does that make? Walking barefoot, that's just a little thing." Or drinking fresh juice, juicing vegetables. And it's like a drop in the bucket. How's that going to help? Well, it's all the drops in the bucket that
Right.
make health. You just put them together, and every time you get off track, you just reroute back on track. And then I
Yeah.
get off track, I don't juice for a few days or whatever,
Mhm.
back on track. It doesn't matter that you get off track. What
Yeah,
matters is that you get back on track.
that's
And
right.
that's all that matters.
Maybe that comes back to what you said about expectation, right? I think we tend to think we have to be perfect at something to keep doing it,
Right.
to call ourselves a juicer. Yes, I juice, but then I have to juice every day. And if I miss a day, then I'm not a juicer anymore.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Let's talk about health culture in this country a little bit. We just touched on it there with a couple of things, but this is something I'm really passionate about because it's a culture that we have now integrated into our society with processed foods, medication, and very little belief in our own natural capabilities. What do you see in your practice? And is this why you came out with your first film?
Yes, it's like I said, noticing these young moms who are very anxious about their children's health and looking outside of themselves for someone to tell them what to do,
Mhm.
and not trusting that innate understanding that our mothers had. I mean, I'm from the generation that stayed home with chicken pox and measles and mumps. It was just a rite of passage. It's not a deadly scourge that's happening.
Right.
So, I saw this in my practice, and I also see these moms. They're also autism spectrum disorders are epidemic.
Yep.
So the moms of kids on the spectrum, which are many, are rightfully taking things into their own hands. They're lions, and they're going to help their children, and this is really respectable. But what happens? They're also being kind of blown with the wind because
Mm.
they go to a Dan doctor, defeat autism now, or they go to a functional medicine person, or they go to ABA therapy. So they're listening to these messages from the outside and just trying everything,
Right.
and in desperation, and it's completely understandable. So sometimes when I get one of these cases in my office, I'll treat the mom as well because she needs to be calmed down. She needs to go inward a little bit, trust that things are going to move in the direction they need to move. And
Mhm.
homeopathic treatment for spectrum kids, very, very different than these other $10,000 blood
Right.
draws and lab work and brain scans. These are so technologically dependent, all these other modalities, whereas homeopathy, it's all through case taking and
Right.
it's all through observation. And I teach the mom, how do you observe your child? What are we looking for? Calm down, take a breath, just watch. And
Right.
he's going to tell us, he or she will tell us what's next. And I teach them what to look for, how to see that. And that's the value of homeopathic education. We're taught to observe.
Right.
So we're connecting the dots through this observation, and it's a slow process. But
Mhm.
I tell moms, give it 6 months, you'll see changes. And it's not running around chasing your tail to all these appointments, and
Right.
it's
Well, but
very, very different.
that's the culture. We want it fixed yesterday.
Right, right. Yeah.
Right.
So I see, you ask about the culture of healthcare, and I see that just the avalanche of autism spectrum disorders is changing things because everybody either has a child on the spectrum or knows a child on the spectrum. And Tammy, I was teaching a class when I was a kid. We never heard of autism,
No.
and I was teaching a class of nurses in their 60s, and they told me when they were in nursing school, the supervisor called them in to say, quick, come into exam room 1. You're going to see a child with autism. You will never get a chance to see this again in your career. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how rare it was.
Was.
And people can't wrap their minds around that now.
Asthma was like that too, though. I knew
Right.
one kid that had asthma in my
Right.
school.
Right. And now it's 56% of kids have a chronic disease because, you know, vaccines are intended to create an inflammatory response in Th2, the adaptive arm of the immune system. But that inflammatory response is indiscriminate. So you're seeing it throughout the body, which translates to asthma, eczema, allergies, food allergies, runny noses, ear infections. It's chronic. These
Yeah.
kids are sick chronically.
Yeah.
And moms today think that's just how kids are. It's not how kids are. When
No.
I was in school, nobody got sick. Kids
No.
weren't sick. Their vibrant, robust immune systems kept them well.
Right. And there's multiple factors too, right? And I think that's kind of part of our health culture too, is we're always looking for a silver bullet to fix, but also we're looking for a target to squash, right? It's
Right,
one thing. So,
right.
but it's not, right?
No, it's multiple. Yeah, it's environmental, and there's so many things assaulting us through the environment: our water, our food, our air, EMFs, vaccines, antibiotics,
Yep.
synthetic materials in our building materials, carpeting, clothing. I mean, it's yeah. And at the cancer center, we learned about examining all personal care products, all cleaning products, everything we're in contact with, because all of those things have chemicals that are contributing
Right.
to our immune breakdown, basically.
Right. So it's about lessening your burden, right?
Right, exactly.
Because we can never eliminate everything. We would drive ourselves nuts, I think, if we tried to eliminate
Right.
every assault.
But this simple act, get plastics out. Don't put plastic in the microwave. Don't
Yeah.
use their immune dysregulators.
Yeah.
So get plastics out. Just pick one thing and be conscious of it and work on it. Or sulfates and out of your soaps. Just simple things that aren't that hard, but they take effort
Right.
and awareness. And
Right.
it's awareness that we are building with this whole catastrophe going on.
Right. I say this all the time, but it's the perfect storm that has led. It's been decades of this lead up that's landed us in this perfect storm where we are in a level of cognitive dissonance where we think a paper mask will protect us
Right,
from getting ill.
right, right.
Right? Because
Exactly.
it doesn't even matter what the outside cure is. We are desperate for something outside ourselves to try to save us.
Right,
And
exactly.
there's no mention of vitamin C, tiny mentions now, just recently, of vitamin D. Um, Nobody's saying, "Hey, lose 10 pounds and it will decrease your risk."
Right,
Very
right,
very few people are talking about this. Instead, we're creating a false sense of security saying, yeah, you can continue eating like crap, smoking, drinking, not sleeping, not
right,
worrying about your gut biome, and don't worry about any of that. Just put on a 10-cent paper mask.
right, right. Yeah, it's pretty foolish. I know. And natural health has become conspiracy theory now.
Right. But how long will this go on before people, will say, I'm not getting the results I want?
I don't know. It's interesting to watch. I mean, all we can do is observe,
Right.
just observe and see. I gave a talk to a group of young practitioners this morning, and one of them was saying her clients come to her and ask her if she's getting the vaccine, and she's afraid to answer. And I said, "What are you afraid of? Just be yourself. If you're not getting it, say why.
Yeah.
Just be yourself and then tell them they need to make their own choice, but they need to do their research. Research doesn't mean watching TV.
No.
That information is not accurate. So,
Absolutely. We have to understand that we are if we want to take someone's advice, then we have to understand that there's going to be consequences with their advice, no matter who it is. So
right,
for me, I want to see the papers. I want to see the research. I want to see how other people's results have come out. And that's really what we should be looking for, right? Instead of
right,
this message that just gets spewed out of a box.
Well, and I want to see the motivation of the individuals saying it. What do they have to gain?
Right.
I mean, a lot of the people that I'm listening to now, PhDs, immunologists, doctors, internationally, have nothing to gain and everything to lose.
Right.
And those are the people that I'm listening to and learning from.
Right. That's
So
such a good point.
it's like the moms of kids on the spectrum who are being bullied or dismissed.
Yeah.
And the question is, what do those moms have to gain? Nothing. They have everything to lose by sticking
Yes.
their necks out. So
Yes.
always, look at that in your evaluation. Connect the dots.
Right.
What came before? When has this happened another time? Lots of ways to connect the dots.
Right. In your movie, you make a statement that says, vaccination does not mean immunity for life against disease. Explain that to me and help people understand what that means. For me, it makes perfect sense because I was vaccinated for measles as a kid and I got the measles.
Right, right.
Right?
Yeah. So, couple of aspects to that. One is that if you're looking at antibodies as your gold standard, which that's shaky ground
Mhm.
because there are high responders, low responders, and non responders. Not everybody produces antibodies. Some of the high responders still get sick. Some of the non responders still don't get sick. So, what do antibodies have to do with disease prevention? They
Right.
don't. They're not the gold standard. And I have other ways that I've come to that conclusion.
Okay.
The other thing is that bacteria, viruses, um, we're talking about life forms. We're talking about energy forms. All life has the directive to find a way, right?
Right.
What's the film?
Survival. Yep.
Yeah, Jurassic Park.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, there you go.
right, life finds a way, and they started like measles vaccine. They said one vaccine, lifelong immunity. But what happened? Started to mutate,
Mm.
and it wasn't working. So now, oh well, we need a booster. We need two vaccines. This is no different than when antibiotics came out. They were a lifesaver for gangrene, for
Yep.
syphilis, for things that were killers, right?
Right.
But bacteria finds a way and mutates and becomes antibiotic resistant more
Mhm.
and more and more. And now we have life threatening forms of bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics, MRSA and others,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Vaccines are going in the same direction. That you can't make enough vaccines to overcome the natural world of viruses and bacteria, and you wouldn't want to because viruses contribute to our evolution as human beings
Right.
completely. Our adaptation to these viruses are upgrades, upgrades, upgrades. Every time we adapt, Zach Bush says it takes 18 to 24 months to gain natural herd immunity, which means we have adapted to that virome
Mhm.
and we're good. It's no longer lethal for us, like SARS, like MERS, right?
Right.
It's
If
that
we allow exposure.
if we allow it, exactly. So that's the process. So your original question was about boosters. What was your
It doesn't mean that you have immunity for life.
exactly? So you know they keep adding boosters. You
Yeah.
don't have immunity for life. Nothing natural exposure gives you immunity for life. And that's the immunity that you pass, maternal immunity that you pass to your children when you nurse them. So
Right.
those first few months of life, they have your immunity. And this
Yeah.
is Mother Nature's way, which is the wisest way, which we have completely skewed because now
Well,
we've removed maternal antibodies for measles because all these young women are vaccinated for measles. They don't have natural antibodies. They're not
right.
passing anything on to their children. So vaccines don't last for life. B, the whole antibody production ruse it's a belief system, but it's not necessarily accurate.
It what so when we're not getting exposed to these viruses in the wild, so to speak, and fighting through them on our own, but we're relying on this vaccine as it mutates. Are we, when we vaccinate, then kind of contributing to the strength and the mutation of the virus?
Exactly. Exactly. Look at
Like we're
pertussis.
feeding the monster.
We're feeding the monster. Pertussis, in one of
Yeah.
my classes, I have newspaper articles about outbreaks of pertussis in
Yeah.
fully vaccinated populations. So then, it's mutated, the
Right.
bacteria. And so they do a booster and a booster and a booster.
Right.
So,
But they're actually labeling people that don't vaccinate as the problem. Oh, it's
right,
because the
right.
anti-vax movement is getting so big that,
Yeah,
this is their fault. I
yeah,
don't
that is.
understand that thinking because if you're
It's not
vaccinated.
thinking, it's propaganda,
Yeah,
Tammy.
that's right.
It's a
You're right.
misnomer.
You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing
Because
thoughtful
if you
about
think
it.
that through, that makes absolutely no sense.
Right, right. And this leads us nicely into homeoprophylaxis because homeoprophylaxis, which is a subset of homeopathy, adapts to all the mutations because
Ah,
it's not dependent on a certain species or it's not dependent on that. It's about like treating like. So it's a symptom picture. So
mhm,
the symptom picture of pertussis with this mutation or that mutation, the symptom picture is similar.
right.
So we've used the same homeoprophylaxis for 20 years or more, 100 years basically, and it still works.
So
So it's
define that for our audience.
mhm.
Define,
Homeoprophylaxis,
homeoprophylaxis. Yeah,
also called HP, is the
HP.
use of a homeopathic remedy prior to meeting a disease in nature.
Okay.
And we can use animal, mineral, vegetable remedies for this, or we can use what's called no-sodes. And no-sodes are remedies made from disease products, either a
Hmm,
fluid or a tissue from someone who has the disease. So we start with the source material
okay.
and it's diluted sequentially and
Mhm,
succussed or shaken
mhm.
until it's past Avogadro's number. There's no molecules of the original substance. It becomes a frequency. It's energetic, it's information.
Okay.
And at that point, that material is anointed onto sugar pellets. That's how it's introduced.
Mhm.
They're taken orally. As soon as
Okay.
it touches mucous membrane, then the body recognizes it
Mhm.
and can build a natural response to a disease when met in nature.
Wow. Is this like immunotherapy? Or is it different from immunotherapy? Immunotherapy, maybe you already have something and you're trying, like an allergy that
Right,
you're
right.
building?
It's different. It's
Okay.
different. So homeoprophylaxis has been around for 200 years.
Wow.
It's about 90% effective. It's used very well in India, where the government provides it free of charge to citizens. It's used in
Mm.
Brazil. It's used in Cuba, where the Findlay Institute, which is a research and development vaccine institute, has a natural department where they make homeoprophylaxis and have done testing with hepatitis, with H1N1, with most recently with COVID-19, with leptospirosis, with many diseases, cholera, very, very successfully.
Wow,
So
90% is, I mean, what's the vaccination figure?
varies. It
Yeah.
varies depending on the vaccine.
Right. And this new vaccine, I believe, is they're saying it's 90% effective or not, but we have no data on that. Absolutely no
No,
data in the real world on that. So it's,
right,
you really have to pay attention to the way they're using these statistics and the words that they're using.
correct,
200 years of data we're talking about here.
right,
That's
right,
pretty powerful
right.
to have a 90% effective
Yeah,
rate.
yeah, and there's very few double-blind placebo control studies with HP because m- much of HP is rolled out for an epidemic.
Right.
So there's a need, and the need is met. It's not set up like a lab experiment
Right.
necessarily.
Right.
So, but we're looking at very large numbers, millions of people, and then observation of these millions of people. And I can show you, I mean, if you want me to share my screen, I can show you like the leptospirosis study in Cuba, where they reduced leptospirosis to zero, basically.
Wow.
And then I have an interview with the director of the center who they blamed her and said, "You've cut off our revenue source from the vaccine. It's your fault."
Yeah.
Yeah. So we see
Definitely send me that link after the interview, and I'd be happy to put it in the show notes so people can access it. If you could,
okay,
that would be
sure.
wonderful. How big of an influence do you think big pharma has on these countries like India compared to America?
They definitely have some sway, but India has squeezed out
Mhm.
Gates. Most
Yes.
recently, the is it Gavi? I'm not sure. Don't quote me, but
Yeah,
because of the deaths from the Gardasil vaccine,
exactly.
so
And
many
I
deaths. And
recently read that they were distributing ivermectin and zinc and something else to every citizen, and it was costing them $2.65.
right, right, yeah. So you see, it comes back to the money,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
profit that's enabled with the vaccines, and which is why all information about treatment was censored,
Yep.
because you can't pass an emergency use act if there's treatment. And
Oh,
that's
really?
right. If there's
That's new information to me.
yeah. So the Emergency Use Act is when
Yep.
there's no treatment for something, they can fast track a vaccine
Mm.
to market, to the people. And so they had to censor everything
Mhm.
about any treatment, because
Yep.
that would mean that, you could use a treatment.
Yep. Wow, I did not know that, and we are still in emergency act, even though there's a
Right.
vaccine.
Right. Well, no, yes, but so many things. First of all, it's not a vaccine.
Yep.
It's genetic manipulation. It's
Right.
not made like a vaccine.
Right.
And the Emergency Use Act is a specific congressional act that was passed after 9/11,
Mhm.
and it was passed so that things could be rushed to market in the event of an anthrax attack or whatever.
Right.
And that's how this got to market. But because it's experimental, based on the Nuremberg trials and the code, the resultant code,
Yep.
they need to inform people this is experimental, and fully inform them of the possible side effects, which I don't know that that's been done everywhere. Um,
They're censoring the side effects.
they're downplaying side effects. I did speak with one woman that she was given a paper prior to the vaccine saying that it was an experimental vaccine under the Emergency Use Act. So maybe that suffices as informing the
Mm.
subject that they're experimental. But what I've heard is that the data collection goes until 2023. So that the data collection for this experiment goes 2 years,
Hmm.
and then they'll, gather
Right.
that. And
That's fascinating. They wanna roll out a health passport right away before this on an experimental vaccine. We're supposed to take it, otherwise our ability to travel is gonna be restricted.
yeah, and I think that some of these things, I don't want to use the word rumor.
Right.
Um, I think what happens is tidbits get planted into media
Mhm.
to familiarize people with this thinking. So
Idea.
then,
Mhm.
yeah, people start talking, twittering, talking about it. And that focus brings things to fruition sometimes,
Mhm.
instead of really recognizing that they can't force something that is in emergency use. It's not legal. There'll be so many lawsuits.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. It's a deep, deep rabbit hole,
It
Tammy.
sure is, and it's unfortunate that it's being labeled like conspiracy theory and gaslit, they just gaslight their way through, and, it's pretty disgusting in my opinion. I just, feel pretty frustrated by a lot of what gets put out there, and I agree
I
with you. I
know.
think I call them breadcrumb stories because they float these leave a little breadcrumb. Let's see how everyone reacts to that.
Right.
I wonder if they're
Right.
gonna put up with that. I wonder, and then they gather the data on that.
Right.
And,
Right.
all these
Yeah.
social media platforms are facilitating it for them,
Right. Right. Yeah.
right?
Anyway.
So in the documentary too, I wanted to make sure we talked about this because there's a disconnect in our health culture that what we eat has nothing to do with our health. I mean, really, because if we actually believed that what we ate, we are what we eat, we wouldn't be eating a lot of the things that we're eating, right?
Right, right,
But one thing that I thought was really, really interesting was how nutrient deficiencies affect how our symptoms manifest.
right, right. Tetiana Obukanich pointed that out
Yeah.
about vitamin A deficiency compared to vitamin D deficiency. She
Yeah.
grew up in Ukraine where there was vitamin D deficiency,
Right.
sunlight,
Yep.
and friends who were closer to the equator with a vitamin A deficiency, right,
Yep.
had a very different set of symptoms. And it's how the body expresses itself, basically. Every symptom is a form of expression. So
Right.
we're always looking at that. And that's what the functional docs are doing now, right?
Yep.
The functional docs are taking you as an individual and seeing what your specific symptoms are. And then with additional testing, whatever, ascertaining, what nutrients you're deficient in or what you're not processing or what genetic pathways are causing you to not process
Right.
certain nutrients. So yeah, it's so important, and it's been ignored by the medical community completely.
Totally. I think they get 4
Totally.
hours of nutritional training.
Nothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing. And the way I have diabetics in my practice and how they're told it doesn't matter what you eat. You just
Well,
yeah,
I lost my mom to cancer, almost a decade ago now, and it absolutely. I didn't know half of what I know now when she was going through that, unfortunately, but it just did not sit right with me when she was in the hospital trying to recover. She was being fed a piece of white bread, which is sugar, you know, a pudding
right.
cup, which is more sugar.
Right. This is hospital food.
Yes.
Interesting. My mother died of cancer when I was 16. And prior to her death, my sister, older sister, started reading an early author of vitamin and supplementation. I can't remember her name, but anyway, and got my mother on a supplement routine with all
Ah,
these supplements. It was considered, this is 1970s, and it was considered, pretty crazy then.
right, right.
And my mother started taking all these supplements, and she went in, and the doctors were amazed. She was rallying. She was doing great. She was in remission. And they, said, "You're doing great." And she said, "Oh, thank you. My daughter's got me on all these supplements." And they said, "You've got to
Oh,
stop that.
oh, of
That's
course they did.
dangerous." They told her
Yeah.
to stop. She was dead within a month. She stopped everything and she died within a month. She just plummeted at that point.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and I think anyone that sits down and spends some time looking into this stuff, you realize pretty quickly this isn't a conspiracy theory craziness thinking. Like, just look at the dots. For goodness sakes, look at the dots, just add some of this stuff up. And in particular, one of the doctors you had on the movie as well had said sick kids are the ones who have been vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. Now, that's a loaded sentence, right? Because we have all these emotions around vaccines, all these
Right,
emotions. You'd think that these people created it themselves.
right,
They're
right.
so emotional about
Very
it.
charged. Yeah. And
Very
Dr.
charged.
Bob, highly respected. People come
Yes.
from miles around to
To
see
see
him.
him.
He's
Yes.
currently battling to protect his license, even though there have been no complaints about him.
Of course.
They're claiming that he's, deceiving people, misleading people, whatever.
Yeah.
He has a notebook with all the inserts in the notebook. And
Yeah.
he said, okay, yeah, yeah, he's happy to vaccinate anybody who wants to, but they need to look at the inserts and be fully informed
Right.
about the side effects. So along the same lines, Paul Thomas just did a study. You familiar with the pediatrician Paul Thomas in Oregon? He's in the
I'm
film.
not.
He's in the very beginning of the film.
Oh, yes. Okay. Now. Yep.
Well, he did a study with his own patients, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. It's an amazing study. It's just
Wow.
come out in the last month.
Wow.
And his findings were as expected. that the unvaccinated kids had very few office visits, very few, colds, allergies, eczema, asthma, all of that in comparison. And he's coming out with part two of the study. Not sure what that involves, but after the study came out, the medical board pulled his license and drummed up charges,
Mhm.
totally
Mhm.
drummed up charges.
Yep.
Some of the
Seeing it
people,
across the board with any
Mhm,
physician that speaks out right now.
right.
Mhm.
So Paul is doing a talk show. Paul is
Excellent.
is going into media. And
Excellent.
yeah, I mean, this is
Excellent.
this is what we've got to do. Have
That's
people with
right.
integrity
That's
who
right.
are going into media. And this is in part why I decided to make a film, because Tammy, I'd written two books, I was speaking internationally,
Mhm.
I was
People aren't
busy,
reading anymore.
but right, right,
I'm
right.
sorry to
And
say
then
it, but it's true.
talking
They can
to
hardly sit still.
yeah, talking to Andy Wakefield, he said media ruined him and media is going to change things. And he started making films. That's when he
Yep.
did Vaxxed in
Yep.
1986, The
Yep.
Act.
The act.
And that just struck a chord with me. And I decided, all right, I'm going to make a film. And I took a filmmaking class and just
Wow.
gung ho launched into it, knowing nothing, making a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
Um, but that was part of my thinking, that media, that's what people are looking at. So
Yeah,
good
and
for Paul starting this talk show.
that's amazing. I'm definitely going to look him up and get plugged into that. This culture that is brewing. I said, these people think the way they act. You'd think that it was their discovery, the vaccine, the way that they protect it, and that they shoot people down. It's one of the only things I've ever come in contact with where people blame the victim. My son was injured by a vaccine when he was 2. He got a flu shot on heavy pressure because my daughter was premature, and they didn't want her to leave the hospital without getting us getting the RSV, flu vaccine during flu season, whatnot. And I succumbed to that pressure. And he ended up having a bout of ITP, and he recovered, thankfully, from that. But
Wow.
it is the only thing that I've ever experienced where the victim is blamed.
Right.
It's now my fault that my kid was injured by a vaccine, and I'm telling you about that because my story is only, quote, anecdotal evidence. It's not real evidence. Well, actually, it says on the insert that flu shots can cause ITP, and no one told me that.
Right. Right.
Had I been informed, being the diligent first time
Parent.
parent, I would have definitely looked into it.
Right.
And this is
Yeah.
what, and if you still want to take that risk, I support your right to do that,
Yeah, exactly.
but not
My
without
daughter
informed.
contracted aseptic meningitis after her vaccines. And I went looking in a Merck manual at the time. This was 1995. And right in the Merck manual, it says that aseptic meningitis is a side effect. Went to the pediatrician, thought she'd be really pleased that I found what it was. She denied it. And that's
Yeah,
when the light bulb went off for me. And I knew
right.
it's up to me to protect my children.
That's right.
Nobody else is going to do it. And that's when I started researching. That was 1995, going to conferences, reading studies,
Yep.
and gathering information myself instead of just listening to the rhetoric, safe and effective.
Right.
So,
And the thing is, many people don't even realize some of the symptoms that they have today were from their vaccines.
right,
So
right.
that they themselves have been affected, but they're accepting a diagnosis of idiopathic, because that's what they told us, that ITP was idiopathic. We don't know why it happens. And
Right.
meanwhile, that was listed on the insert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many people, I would say, set your bias aside, this ridiculous label of anti-vax. I challenge you, if something hurts your child, I bet you'll become anti whatever that is,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
I mean, if a drunk driver hit your kid, you would be anti-drunk driving. So, we really have to take the stigma away and stop blaming when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to vaccines, particularly with autism. We don't know the tip of the iceberg when it comes to autism, do we?
Right. And what other industry has complete liability? If your child was hurt by a car seat or a crib or a stroller, it would be taken off the market immediately.
Right.
But your child can be killed or injured by a vaccine, but it has nothing to do with the vaccine, and they have no liability whatsoever.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
alone should give people pause.
Right. Absolutely. And, that's something you think about directly. What you can do in your life is to keep an eye out on some of this legislation that's being passed.
Right.
Right. I mean, there's so much we're being pummeled with right now in the world in terms of news and issues. But like we said before, pick one thing, you know, pick one thing and kind of, keep an eye on that cause. And we can all do, if we all do that, then we can really start to make a difference. Champion, behind these people who, like Dr. Paul Thomas, you mentioned, we need to rally around these people, not alienate them. They
Right.
want us to alienate them.
Right. Right. These are the people we should be donating to, supporting, getting their message out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So on that note, with emotions and stuff, how have emotions affect our health? We've talked a little bit about that, but I want to make sure people understand how powerful that is.
It's immense. I mean, that's what I learned at the Dispenza um, retreat for a week. That's what I've learned through meditation and reading people like David R. Hawkins, who
Hmm.
talks about power versus force, consciousness raising. There's nothing more damaging to our immune system than fear.
Mm.
Fear is a killer. And whenever we have feelings of elation, happiness, hope, positivity, we are boosting our immune system. It's that spontaneous. There have been studies done where they take blood samples of a person right after a doctor walks in and says, "I'm sorry, but your test results are very serious."
Right.
And then they take blood samples from that same person when the doctor comes back and says, "Oh, I made a mistake. It wasn't your test results. You're doing fine." And they see differences in the actual labs that
Wow.
we are creating enzymes moment by moment. So, even if you can find a happy thought for 5 minutes a day, you're boosting your immunity. And the reverse of that is fear will kill your immune system. And fear is what has been used to manipulate millions of people during this fiasco over the last year.
Right.
So, Robert F. Kennedy
Hmm.
spoke with someone about the Nuremberg trials,
Yeah.
and an individual who was asked, "How did you get people to do those atrocities?" And he said, "It was easy, fear.
Yeah.
You control people with fear completely."
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are realizing that. I have to mention this thing I saw yesterday. I actually saw, and online, it was a photo of a man who had put a plastic container, like a juice container. He had cut out the bottom and put it over his head to wear as a mask, right? For protection. Fear will lead you to lunacy if you
Right,
let it.
right, right.
Right. And it's such a powerful tool to use to get people to comply with something that you want them to comply with.
Right,
Right.
right. So that would be my comments about the emotions. I mean, do whatever you need to do to raise your frequency, your emotions.
Hmm.
Cooking, gardening, take a bath, read a book, have a cup of tea, talk to a friend, pet an animal, hug a kid, whatever it takes to feel that little burst of uplift, that's what's going to help your immunity.
Right. And so many people think that they don't have to, like, you have to plan that stuff. You have to plan.
And be conscious moment to moment. Like if your day is getting you down, just be aware of that. And what do I need to do now to change the tune, change the channel on my day?
Right. Right. And be willing to be flexible to do that no matter,
Mhm.
no matter how, oh, this doesn't fit in my plan. This isn't what my schedule is for today. Well, you need to be mindful about where you're at, and also really understanding that this directly affects your health,
Right.
and see it
Absolutely.
that way.
Mhm.
Don't just listen to the words and be like, "Oh yeah, I know it affects my health. I can," no, don't make it turn into something that then has to be a huge life stopping thing, right? Where your health will make you stop what you're
Right.
doing,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So one last thing, what do you think if we don't kind of turn this health culture around, if we don't shift the way we see our health and how our health needs to be cared for, because the allopathic model really is disease management, right? We need to be more proactive. We have to have this paradigm shift in our thinking when it comes to our health. What do you see if we don't have this shift? What's our future gonna be like?
Well, Tammy, I'm an optimist at heart.
I like that. Me too.
So I thoroughly believe we're going to see an immense shift in systems, health, education, politics,
You think
medicine.
this is our breaking point?
I think this is the breaking point. I think we're going to see immense shifts. I think it's going to take a long period of time, but even, astrologically, if you follow the different major events astrologically, we are in one that hasn't happened for 2,000 years.
Oh, I
So
didn't
we
know
are
that.
going to see a huge shift. Now, what's the fallout going to be? That we don't know. That might be pretty uncomfortable.
Right.
But I believe to my core that we are here on this earth specifically during this time to shepherd in this change,
Mm,
and we're playing different roles. Some people are playing the asleep role and they're going to maybe sacrifice themselves. Some people are playing the lion-hearted role. We're
right.
all playing a different role, and just being yourself is what's necessary,
Mhm.
because if we continue to launch a battle against microbes, it's to our own demise. We will end humanity because we need microbes to live, as we've discovered with the microbiome, with all the things that we've learned in the last decade.
Yep.
So it's infantile thinking. If we stay on that track, we will extinguish our species and our planet probably as well.
Wow.
But I don't believe that's going to happen.
I don't either. I'm with you. I'm an optimist and I see tons of people waking up. I think that there's right now we're in this awake stage, like, okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but what do I do?
Right, right. And like you said, pick one thing,
Mhm.
find a place to contribute, make donations, what resonates with you.
Mhm.
Um,
And if you can't find it, if you're not in a place yet where you feel like you wanna stand up and speak out for the cause, then don't tear other people down that
mhm,
are doing it. That
right,
that in itself is an action,
right, right.
right?
And
Because
just even speaking up, I mean, just be who you are. You don't even need
yeah.
to storm the Capitol. Just be who you
No.
are, you know, in your
Yeah,
own little neighborhood, in your own little
that's right.
terrain.
Yep,
Be who you are. That emanates out from us. Our energy. I'm a homeopath. Energy is my profession.
yep.
Our energy emanates out from us, and
Mhm.
that will affect other people.
Right.
And it's limitless what effect that can have. So just be who you are, stand strong in that, find your happy place, and focus on that and stay focused.
Yeah. Where can people, connect with you, Cilla? Because
Mhm.
I know there's gonna be a lot of people that wanna see these films, and,
There's a
connect
free
with you
segment.
personally.
Yeah, there's a free segment on realimmunity.org.
Okay.
So if they go there, if they sign up for the newsletter, there's 5 free resources. So there's the free quest portion of Quest for Real Immunity. There's fact sheets. There's all different resources that are free for them signing up for the newsletter.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and I have homeoprophylaxis for this current flu. That's
Yeah.
there. I don't say those trigger words like COVID or prevent or any of that. It's
Right.
simply boosting your immunity,
Right.
influenza. That's there. There's lots of resources there. And then there's also a link there to a free knowledge vault. In the free knowledge vault, there's over 100 documents in
Oh, wow.
different chapters. And one of them is the homeoprophylaxis chapter with studies.
Excellent.
So
Excellent. Do you have any events coming up, or are you taking patients in your clinic?
I do take clients, and I
Okay.
have two colleagues that work with me that they take the overflow. So if there's no
Okay.
room to see me, I don't have events. I used to travel and speak internationally, but nothing's being held in person anymore.
Right.
So kind of landlocked right now, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
But that's that's excellent. Where's your clinic located?
I'm outside of Minneapolis, southwest of Minneapolis.
Okay. And what's the name of your clinic?
It's just, it's just me. So I don't have the clinic name, and I go under Real Immunity or Family Homeopathy Care.
Family. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cilla, for joining me today. This is such a valuable conversation. I hope that we have brought a little less fear to people and also broadened their spectrum of what they understand health care is actually, because it's not managing disease.
Right. Thank you so much, Tammy. This has been a great opportunity and a lovely interview. So thank you.
Thank you. If the naturally inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the naturally inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.